joining on the Sofa with Esther for a special Wednesday episode are award-winning filmmakers Damian Daniel and Noella Mingo. They'll be sharing the powerful stories behind their latest documentary, Fearless, a moving tribute to the women of the Windrush Generation. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are across the globe. Welcome to On the Sofa with Esther, special edition. And today I'd like to welcome Damian Daniel and Noella Mingo, the award-winning filmmaking duo behind their Watching Us productions. Damian is a BAFTA-winning cinematographer whose credits span later with Jools Holland, Black Hollywood, They've Gotta Have Us, and the BAFTA-nominated drama Kirkmoore. Noella, a costume designer turned filmmaker, creates powerful stories centering voices from the African diaspora. Together, they've produced acclaimed films selected for BAFTA and Academy Award qualifying festivals. Their latest documentary, Fearless, shines a long overdue light on 6 extraordinary women aged 80 to 92, members of the Windrush Generation, who left their homelands to build post-war Britain. Interwoven with historic archive footage, Fearless captures their untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and resistance during times of deep social change. So welcome, Damian, and welcome, Noella.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, I usually ask all of my guests, I love to start with, who is Noella and who is Damian in a nutshell, in a peanut shell, or a coconut shell?
Who is Noella? So I am somebody that loves telling stories and loves hearing people's stories. And I have felt for a long time that the stories that I want to hear and see just aren't out there, which is why we started making our own films, really. It was that desire to tell those stories that you just don't see or hear anywhere else.
And I like shooting and filming those stories.
that's really
quite handy.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on your latest documentary, Fearless. I went to see the screening last week and I was really drawn in and taken in, not just because of the stories, but by there were 6 women from 6 different backgrounds, which was really quite unique, especially those telling a similar story and being through a similar journey. And it was just really interesting to understand their lives through their journeys from different backgrounds, from different cultural backgrounds as well. And yet there was that thread of similarity in the midst of it. So why did you sort of angle your lens through the lives of different women from different backgrounds rather than, women from the same sort of cultural experience, if I should say?
Well, we were interested in all those women who came to Britain after World War II. The British government sent out this call to the empire, come and help us, we need your help. And because so many people from around the world saw Britain as the mother country, not just from the Caribbean, from South Asia, even from Ireland. So they just felt like they wanted to help and do something. And we hear more the stories of men, I felt.
Definitely.
And I felt we didn't really hear about the women that came and they were nurses, or they worked in factories, or they worked in schools, and they did all these things that helped build these incredible communities that we know and love today. And so it was the need to tell that story, really. We felt it was something that we haven't seen or heard before.
And look, growing up in London, we're both London born and bred. London is a vast melting pot of different people, different experiences, different backgrounds, but do have a common theme going. And these 6 women, represent a bit of that, and there's stories to tell. And as Noella said, we wanted to certainly tell those stories, but with women, amplify the voices of older women that you very rarely hear. you very rarely hear. So and that's what we wanted to do, and we wanted to put it out there.
We kind of felt that, sorry to interrupt you, we felt that these women were invisible, or you see an older person, particularly women, and you just assume they were always old.
Yes.
Whereas they still are these incredibly vibrant women, but they were certainly vibrant when they were young. And so that's what brings the sort of the warmth and the joy to our film.
And in the process of making this documentary, how did it change, or did it change you individually? How did it make an impact in your own world, in your own lives, and through the lens and that you looked at the elderly women from there?
For me, the thing that fascinated me was after we did the interviews, I kind of plotted a timeline through their lives, and that's when or their young lives, and that's when I realized the amount of change socially that there was for women during that time. The battles that those women had to fight, not just racism or people who were anti-Irish or anti-Asian or anti-immigration, but they also had to fight for equal pay, equal rights. There was all of these battles. They had to fight for education for their children that they weren't getting. And so for me, it was a real eye-opener, because when you look at history, you look at this snapshot. So you might learn about the Notting Hill uprising, not that we learned that in school, but I learned about it along the way because my parents were living in Notting Hill at the time. But you don't really think of it from the point of view of what people were going through in real life. You just sort of see it as this snapshot of something happened, but when you actually can put a real person in that situation, it completely changes everything. And it also made me feel that getting older, you can still have fun and have a wild time. We were at Maggie's, one of the women's 90th birthday party, the night before the screening that you came to, and she's 90, but she was up dancing, getting down, winding up her waist the whole night,
And still turned up on Sunday and came and did a Q&A.
Yeah.
But wasn't that with Maggie? And I'll ask you the same question. But what I saw with Maggie, it was a mindset as well. It's almost like she was born with this cheeky grin on her face, and it's to say, world, here I am going to embrace you. And that's what I really got from Maggie. And having that mindset also helps you to cope through some challenging times. And so, Damian, the same question to you. You obviously you were looking literally through the lens of these women's lives. What did you take away from it, or how did it impact you, or in terms of maybe your view of?
Yeah, I mean, it's a history lesson. It's a history lesson. And interestingly enough, actually, when filming the women, just the technicals of how we went about telling their stories, I filmed on a couple of cameras. And the thing is, it was only after I think the first edit, when we watched back the first edit, while actually filming, a lot of the stories, it wasn't that I wasn't taking them in, but we're a very small crew, so I've got 2 cameras on it, and the sound and the lighting, I'm constantly thinking about framing. So Noella is asking the questions, they're answering, and of course, yes, you are reacting to certain things. But for me, anyway, it's not, a lot of it is, I don't want to say I'm not taking it in, because I am. But it was a lovely surprise to hear the stories from the first edit, because it's like, oh, I don't remember that, because obviously my focus is trying to make them look good technically,
Yeah.
So that was actually really beautiful. And it is a history, these women are institutions. There are stories that we knew about, but there are a lot of stories that we didn't know about. And it is that tradition of, the African griots in passing down the stories for the next generation, for you to move on, because you can only move forward if you know your past, And what's really interesting is, the struggles that they went through, which they overcame. And obviously, as the mindset that you say, they overcame it, but at the same time, they're going to make sure that they're going to learn from their experiences, and they're going to have fun as well. But the struggles, yes, of course, with women's rights and with the battle for pay and for equality and all of that fight, you know, we know about that. But we fast forward 60 years, and in some aspects, they're still having that fight.
Yeah,
they're still having that fight. It's going to, and especially with you know, how the world is now, and because we're seeing things live and direct, you know, which they didn't have 60 years ago. You know, it may well be interesting in another 60 years to see what this generation is like, you know, when they're looking back. Do you know what I mean? And that's a really interesting take from it. That's what's got me thinking. It's like, oh my God, in some aspects we have actually moved on vastly, but in others we're still fighting.
I think something else with Damian is that one of the women is his mum, and his mum is famous for not wanting to talk about what happened. She never wants to talk about it. She always says, why are you interested in the past? We should be thinking about the future. But once we sat down to interview her, there's a camera, couldn't stop her talking. So, you know, suddenly there was all these things that Damian learned about his mum's life that was complete news to him, which was really fascinating. And it's interesting now, you know, she's my mother-in-law, his mum, and we're over there quite a lot. Whenever I'm there and Damian's not there, she'll start telling me things. She'll say, oh yeah, and then I did this, because it's like the lid has come off the box. And she's always got a story she wants to tell me. Quite often she won't tell me if Damian's there, and from time to time she'll say, don't tell Damian I told you that.
But even today, I was round at my mum's today this afternoon, and I was telling her about, because we had our second screening at the Bertha Dock House yesterday, which for us is a real coup because it's such an iconic venue, and for them to screen our film is more than special. But I was telling Mum about that, and she's going, oh, you know, I wish, because there's more that I want to add. There's more that I would, and I said, yeah, but Mum, we can't. The film's finished. It's out there. We can't just add. We can't just add it. And she goes, yes, but you know, I felt I didn't say what I wanted to. And I said, yeah, but Mum, you know, the film's out there, but you know,
excellent.
Part two.
Maybe she needs to be in, you know, get her a few interviews, so she can sort of start to expand on that.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, Damian, when you were talking about, you know, how much certain things have moved on for women, but certain other things are still the same. And what was coming to me was they were fighting for so many different things, like you said, but even just on the ground, you know, just moving around as women and as women of color, the challenges that they probably had in, you know, those environments, or just maybe just doing their daily chores, you know, the challenges around race as well, added to all of that. And yet, and I do believe that they have learned from what I saw with the documentary. I do believe they've learned, because they still want to smile and they still want to dance. And so that in itself says, I've been through, you know, like Dr. Martin Luther King, I've been to the, you know, talk about being on the top of the mountain. They've seen it all, they've experienced it, but there's still that human essence of wanting to enjoy life, whatever that is.
I mean, my mum didn't bring it up in the documentary, but it's something I've just sparked off something, because I do remember many years ago, actually, one time Mum saying, you know, maybe it was on the ward or when she was in a district as a district nurse, you know, sometimes, you know, white patients didn't want her treating her because she was black, you know, which, you know, is, and I'm sure all of these women nurses will tell you similar stories, you know, and so, you know, how do you deal with that? And so they dealt with it with their own internal, you know, mechanisms, coping mechanisms, you know, some you know, like my mum heavily rely on faith, you know, others have other, and it's that well, you know, if you don't want to be treated, bye. You know,
but I'm sure it must have sort of hit still, because, you know, they're still human beings, and, you know, you're doing this role as someone who's caring. You're in a caring role, and
Yeah.
someone's rejecting you because of that. You know, all those things that you have to process. And this is a question for you both. The stories that they shared, can you share maybe one that really, really touched your heart? I mean, they were all incredibly touching, and the women were all incredibly, and you know, they all had very individual characters. But was there one, yeah, was just one that stuck out, that impacted, that took your breath away?
I think for me, there are so many, like you say, it's really hard to choose. But the thing that sort of struck me because it impacted me was when Nagis talked about education and how she was saying the people at school weren't very nice. And what she was really talking about was how black and brown children were treated differently to white children, and how black and brown children were bussed out of schools if there was deemed to be too many black and brown children in schools, or they weren't giving the same level of education as white children. The belief being the black and brown children might hold back the education of the white children. And I know, and I think actually for both of us, we really, and probably for a lot of black and brown people, can speak of being really badly treated in schools. You know, I remember being called a derogatory term by my maths teacher in front of the whole class. I was the only person of color in that class.
Wow.
And that's probably something that's happened a lot. It's a lot to us, where we're kind of held back. And another, I know you said one, but the other thing with me is also Nagis, when she talks about how she's happy with her life, but she's ready to die when it's time for her to die. You know, it's that real sort of strength of, she's this funny, vibrant woman, but she knows probably her time is coming, and when her time has come, she's ready for it because she's had a great life. And that sort of brings a tear to my eye every time I hear her say it, and I probably heard her say it 100 times now, but yeah.
I mean, just going on from what Noella said about the education, you know, I went to secondary school in the 80s, you know, and I was put in the lowest sets. In secondary school, I hated it, you know, and I was put in the lowest sets, and it seemed too much to be a coincidence that it was mainly all the black kids, you know, and the Irish, you know, and we had, you know, supply teachers in our 5th exam year, you know, which of course teachers are just coming in. Of course, you have no affinity with the teacher, so of course you mess around, you know. And I actually went to, I went to a state secondary school, but it had quite a good reputation, you know. But I could not wait to, you know, there was no way I was staying on in the 6th form in that school, and they even tried to block that. You know, when I went to college, I didn't do A levels. I did a BTEC national diploma. But then finally, when the tutor made my reference, I managed to get to see it on the first day of college. And on his reference was, you know, I'm being too ambitious, wanted to do a BTEC national diploma because I probably wouldn't get the qualifications. And careers, you know, my career's advice was, you know, down to labouring, you know, nothing. I'd probably earn more, but do you know what I mean? It's certainly not the aspiration of, you know, working in the arts, or, you know, none of that wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
And one of the stories in the film that resonated with me is actually Anne, the lady from Ireland, when she talks about, you know, coming to England and seeing the signs, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs, which we've, you know, my mum and dad told me about those signs from when we were young, and we know that phrase, and we brought up with that phrase, but I've never heard it coming from a white lady. Do you know what I mean? You know, so that kind of to me that really hit, you know.
And where do you see this going? Where do you see, are you bringing it a part 2? Because it's been so well received from what, and I know you're probably feeling under pressure. But, you know, where do you see it going, and what do you want for people watching this? What do you want them to take away?
It's in a way a part 2 Fearless, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Fearless has traveled around the world, you know, it's shown all over the world, which has been incredible. And now for us to have this limited but a cinema run is really something special. And we hope that it will go around to other parts of the country as well. You know, we've had some interest in Birmingham. It's going to Penzance,
down in Cornwall,
which is great. We'd like it to be in Manchester, Bristol, different places. So for us, really, it's for as many people as possible to see it. And at the screening yesterday, one of the questions was, could we get this into schools? Because people were saying this is like a history lesson that you don't get in your history lesson. And that's something that we'll certainly look at. But it's definitely bums on seats. I mean, every time we do a Q&A, somebody says, well, why haven't you done this about men? And it's not that I've got anything against men, and men of this generation are also amazing, but it was just that we felt we heard more about that. And it could be that we go on and make another sort of story of these, of different women. It's definitely possible. But in a way, it is a part 2 because it started off as a short film called When I Was a Younger that had 3 of these women in it. And it was only like 8 minutes long, but everybody said we could listen to these women talk all day. And that's why we made the feature-length version and introduced the social history and the archive and 3 more women. And it's been brilliant. You know, you can't imagine really the impact our little film has had. And so it's to try and get that impact spread as far as possible.
Yeah, I mean, all the while, you know, with it going through the festivals and now this very small cinema run, we have approached, you know, commissioners and broadcasters, and we still will, without luck at the moment, but we still will. And it's, you know, it as Noella says, to try and get the reach out as wide as possible, which is very difficult when you are. We haven't got a distribution company. We're doing it ourselves. We've self-financed this film. We couldn't fit the word independent more readily than we have. In terms of doing a second one, you know, we've again, independent filmmakers, we've got other stories we want to tell in documentary and in fiction and in narrative. And so, you know, I think, you know, this, you know, I think as a standalone film, Fearless is great, you know, and it's our baby. If a commissioner commissioned us for part 2,
take notes.
You know, then we would consider that. You know, always.
And we've all, with these women, we've got so much footage.
Yeah.
Because the interview, there's so much in the interviews, you know, sort of we've picked out the choice bits, but there's so much there from these women's stories, and so much through the social history as well. So it's always possible, but we've got a few other things.
That we want
to. Well, I'd like to just say thank you so much. It's been, you know, the screening just talking to yourselves has been engaging. And yes, there's this sense of wanting more, but like you said, you need someone to commission part 2. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you, and I will put up details of where people can see the other screenings, and just wishing you all the best. And I don't think you need to be wished the best. Actually, you are actually doing it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to Damian and Noella, and you must go along to one of their screenings to see Fearless. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to click the bell icon for notifications on future videos. Thank you for watching.